Hello, and welcome to The Resource, the podcast propelling employer brands to recruit smarter and retain better. I'm your host, Priscilla Peters.
And I'm your other host, Scott Dismuke. And Priscilla, I'm at home. I'm not normally at home because as we are recording this, we are in the ice box known as Nashville right now. It is
Yes.
awful.
Yes, we have gotten some interesting weather, but look at us. Look at us good trucking folks that we're just making it happen either way. We're delivering either way, right?
We're delivering either way. Yeah, I know there's a lot of folks at Conversion. There's a lot of folks at PDA that don't have power, have been without power for a good almost 48 hours now. And it's very cold. And so
Yes.
there's a lot of folks that are struggling. I know how much did you get in Little Rock?
We got like almost pretty much a foot. Like once it's all said and done, I think it's about a foot. And it was like ice, snow. So it's still, I don't think it's going to melt for a while, but we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah, we got a little bit of snow here just south of Nashville, got about maybe an inch and a half, and then somewhere between, depending on what maps you look at, a half an inch to 3/4 of an inch of ice. And we got
Ooh.
trees down everywhere. It's not pretty. Not pretty at all. But we're powering through, and some folks here in Nashville are having to power through a lot more than others. So
Yeah, I think on the news I saw them. Well, first of all, as us Southerners, we're good at a lot of things. Winter weather, it's not one of them. So
nope.
We go on record. Those of you listening, you're like, oh, please, come on, a foot of snow. What's that? Listen, we do not operate well. I think we might in Little Rock, we might have 2 like snowplow trucks, maybe. I don't even know.
Yeah.
But I heard on the news yesterday, it was colder in Little Rock than it was in Juneau, Alaska.
Yeah, I had somebody tell me that exact thing. I will tell you this, about 2 days before this hit, so it hit over the weekend. I actually had some COVID flashbacks because I went into our grocery store here, our
Oh,
neighborhood
yeah.
grocery store, and there were so many empty shelves. Like there was no beef, there was no chicken, there was no milk, there was no bread. I mean, it was just empty shelf after empty shelf. And so yeah, I didn't like that COVID flashback much with empty shelf. Now they did have toilet paper and paper towels, which we didn't have during COVID.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's certainly been an interesting few days. I think we were talking earlier today, and I told you I am so done with ice. Like I may even quit putting ice in my drink. I'm so done with ice. But we power through, right?
We did. We survived. And here we are wrapping up January. This episode will come out beginning of February, but we have some really good data and information. This is our Q4 retention and recruiting data rundown review. So we think you guys are really going to enjoy this. I think there's a lot of good information here that we have for folks, especially going into the new year and kind of what to expect with what's going on. I think it's going to be a little bit different than 2025. Hopefully on some fronts better, but unfortunately it may start to get tougher to find drivers, we think.
Oh, I definitely think it's going to be tougher to find drivers, and God, I sure hope it gets better. I mean, can it get worse? I mean, I hope it can't. But I think speaking of powering through, there's been a lot of folks in this industry that have been powering through over the last 3 years. So hopefully we even just a minimal bump in freight would be nice. But to your point, capacity has been exiting. A lot of that's in the data. That you're going to talk about and that I'm going to talk about. So we hope folks will enjoy our Q4 data rundown.
All right, let's get to it. So let's dive in. Q4 data rundown. Here we go. So some economic and industry data that we have for you. The first thing we wanted to do is just, okay, new year, let's see the lay of the land in the actual driver market. So if you're looking at the truck driver market, there are about 3.5 million CDL holders. And according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, about 57% of those are what are referred to as tractor trailer truck drivers, which is typically our audience. So that just gives you an idea of the high level number that you're looking at. Then when you look at it further by generation, I thought this was interesting. This came out in a report that was released in Q4 by ATRI, the American Transportation Research Institute. They do lots of different surveys and compile data, and they released this was included in one of the big pieces that they had. So I thought this was interesting. This is a generational makeup of drivers. For those of us who have been in this industry for a while, it's kind of like wild to see the millennials at 30.7%. I remember years ago talking about how do we recruit and retain millennials, and here we are, and over 30% of the driver market today is in that range. So just to give you an idea, if you're wondering about years, like how these are all defined, baby boomers were born 1946 to 1964, according to this data. Generation X, the best generation, right? We were born 1965 to 1980. Millennials, 1981 to 1995. Gen Z, 96 to 2010. And then they also included what's called the silent generation, that they were born 1928 to 1945. Obviously, there's a handful of those still present, but we know they will be retiring out, kind of getting out of the industry soon, as well as the baby boomers. So this is just interesting for us to look at and see. We've got work to do as these younger generations kind of come in. And I know that's a part of many of your strategy and everything that you are, that you're looking at. So also, when you look at the driver employment landscape, it's interesting to see the both sides of it. So you've got the CDL holder driver side, where most of them, well, 46.1% work for a fleet with 100 or more trucks. So what most in the industry would consider a large fleet. I know many of you have more than 100 trucks, but when you look at the whole landscape of the industry, over half of the fleets have just one truck, but 1% of fleets have more than 100 trucks. So you can just see the balance of where drivers land in relation to fleets. So we thought that was interesting. Wanted to share that with you guys as well. Okay, listen, if you don't get anything else out of today, I want you to kind of leave with this, because if there's any takeaway I could tell you, aside from how technology is really kind of impacting recruiting, I would tell you to focus on this. I think that this is going to really help us tell the story of what is going to go down in 2026. So we've got two things happening here. Okay. We've got the regular driver shortage that we all kind of know, live and breathe, right? Like we know what that looks like, but we have these additional, what I am calling supply pressures that are on the market today that some of these we did not have last year. Some of these were not the same as they are this year, last year. And so I just think it's important when you look at the full story, when you're sitting down with your recruiting leaders and your C-suites and you're going, listen, does it feel like it might be tightening up a little and we need drivers a little more than we did last year? This is why. And maybe some of you are already feeling this. I've talked to a lot of you. I think you are. But you could just see all of these things kind of happening. The non-domiciled CDL policy, it's estimated to impact around 200,000 drivers. When you look at the number of drivers that are currently in prohibited status within the clearinghouse, that's over 200,000 drivers. And then you throw in all of these other factors. Hopefully, maybe some of you are experiencing some freight volume improvements. We're hearing whispers. We're not getting super excited just yet, but we're hearing, rates are kind of going up. You're negotiating some new rates. You're getting some freight that you didn't have before. Freight's picking up from some of the shippers that you work with that you didn't before. So that's certainly going to play a role. The number of jobs that we're seeing, truck driving jobs that we're seeing in the market, is increasing, which also tells us that freight's improving because you need more drivers. So lots of different things going on. I'm not going to go through all of these, but I would just tell you this tells the story. Okay. If you need, like, what is happening? Like, I'm starting to feel it. I feel like it's, I'm needing drivers a little more than I used to. this is probably why. All of these kind of come into play. And these are just some good factors for you to look at and think about. And then, like I said, when we're looking at the data that's coming out, this actually came out from Indeed. When we're looking at this and we're seeing like what are the number of job seekers eyeballs that are on each truck driving job. Well, in August of 2024, it was 16. And then it dipped down to 12 in November of 2025. Now, what that tells us is there's more jobs. So the job seekers per job are kind of shrinking because there's more jobs. As folks are adding more truck driving jobs, you're going to continue to see that shrink. It's going to get tougher and tougher and more competitive to hire drivers in this market. So that's just kind of a good economic what's going down kind of in the industry today, and hopefully some things you can take back to your team regarding that. All right, we're going to dig into our advertising and marketing data. For those of you that are conversion clients, we'll be sending out an e-blast later today that includes a link where we include some of our cost per hire data that's exclusive to you. Also, we include cost per full app data that we have. So that will be coming your way soon. So keep an eye out for that later today. When we look at the overall best performing strategies that we had for touch points and hires, so we track both. We track, what did the driver journey look like from click to hire? And when we look at that, these are the three sources that played the biggest role, that had the most touch points and hires when it came to strategies for Q4. The number one tool was Lead Assist. We'll kind of dig in a little bit more into that and kind of explain some of that, but we always just like to call out some of the best performing sources that we had. Cost per hire trends. Again, this is just something we look at high level year over year. So as we ended 2025, we wanted to see like, what does the overall cost per hire trend look like? And we are primarily focused on the advertising and marketing costs related to hiring a driver. So when you look at from year over year for the last 4 years, you can see how that's kind of trended, and we're in this kind of upward direction. And what that really tells us is that competition is kind of beginning to creep up. It went down over year, 21 to 2022. We all remember how hard it was to find drivers post COVID in 2021. So as that, need and that high level of need declined, then cost per hire went down again. 2023, as we saw kind of this freight recession begin to take hold. And then 2024 started creeping back up and then crept back up again last year. So again, just trends we watch, we think you would be interested in as well. When we looked at what we call lead status trends, so these are trends, what we do is we look at, okay, let's look at all of 2025 and let's see like where are the negative statuses in your ATS. When you're inside your ATS and those statuses, like where did those negative statuses grow? Because obviously we want to keep drivers in the funnel and keep them in positive status. And when we were looking at that, at the lead status trends year over year, we noticed that the largest increase in negative statuses was inside the candidate withdrew, declined offer status. So what does that tell us? It tells us it's super important for you to connect with pre-qualified drivers as quickly as you can. Get to them through, get them through the driver lead funnel as quick as you can so that you can really kind of make sure that you reach them top of funnel quickly and they don't end up in that particular status. All right, let's talk a little bit about AI, specifically Lead Assist's AI technology. I know many of you who are conversion customers are on Lead Assist. It's a tool that you use. Here's just some data that came out of that last quarter. Lead Assist, the AI technology in Lead Assist is delivering 6 times more full apps than a traditional recruiter when we just compare those side by side. Cost per hire is lower. You can see now that we've implemented customized AI agents, we'll talk about that a little bit more. We're connecting up to 70% of qualified drivers with recruiters. Listen, here's what this means. And this is really where kind of, I would say the magic happens, if you will, is your recruiters, because the AI agent is able to pre-qualify and only connect you with drivers that you are having a meaningful conversation with, high intent drivers. Now your recruiters aren't having to chase down drivers Let the AI agent do that. Let the tech do that. What you're doing is your team is able to have, conversations with pre-qualified, high quality, higher intent leads. And it's really, really impactful. So that's kind of some fun stuff that came out of that. Also, if you're wanting to see, like, okay, I'm kind of on the fence. Do I do AI agents? Do I not? Those who have implemented AI agents with lead assist, you can see kind of the before and after with these three carriers. We included three carriers here. So before implementing the AI agent, you can see like the percentage of recruiter driver connections that they had, and then with the agent. So it dramatically improves that. Again, your recruiters are able to have more meaningful conversations, and that's super helpful as well. All right. So here's a case study. Like, okay, how does that break down, Priscilla? Like, what does that actually mean when I'm thinking about using Lead Assist Agentic? So this was a company who was like, okay, I'm investing in getting all of these leads, but my recruiters are buried in like qualifying them, doing this manual outreach, all my pipelines are clogged, all the things. And so they decided to add the agentic piece. So they had a customized AI agent created, smarter screening questions, all the things, right? And you could see the driver connection rate increased. It went from 27% to 49%. Two times more qualified driver, almost two times more qualified driver connections. And really it goes back to, like I was saying before, they were able to have meaningful conversations with drivers who had a higher intent. So again, if you're on the fence about Lead Assist Agentic, we have some folks you could reach out to, talk to them about it. Obviously, our team could help you with that as well. All right, let's switch gears. So we're still kind of on this AI front, but really want to talk a little bit about what's going on with search when it comes to AI. Obviously, we all know when we search now online, we're being fed AI summaries, whether we're in the GPT or not searching. If you're just searching on Google, you're getting fed an AI summary. And year over year, this data came out of Search Engine Land. AI search traffic was up 527%. That is not a typo. Our creative team, when they were building these slides, they messaged me and said, "Hey, Priscilla, I think that's supposed to be 52.7." I said, "No, ma'am, that's 527%." So this is what is happening. People are changing the way they search, drivers included. And if we ignore that as an industry, we are not going to win when it comes to getting eyeballs on the jobs that we want to get eyeballs on. Another thing that we saw that kind of came out of the data was SEM aware, which is top of funnel search. So think of Google falls in the SEM aware category. The cost per hire for that held the lowest spot for cost per hire. Now it was only for 1 month, but we thought this was intriguing. So as driver competition is increasing, cost per hire on awareness campaigns, so more top of the funnel, is improving, which is giving us the note that drivers are converting even at the top of the funnel. So that was intriguing. Now listen, SEM Interactive, engines like Indeed and those kinds of things took back the top spot in November and December, but it is notable that that happened in October. Okay, here's some social media trends. So we just always like for you to kind of know what's going on in the social media world. One of the things that continued is that the news feed and Facebook Reels, like those combined, really dominated the first top spot. What that tells us is continue creating vertical video formats, continue creating reels, continue making those part of your strategy. Another thing that was interesting that we saw is there was a subtle shift by Meta that they made on their platform regarding page likes. It used to be that you clicked on a little thumbs up like button. We all know that from Facebook, but now it just says follow. And that change, you wouldn't think making a subtle change like that would impact page likes as much, but it led to a 21% decrease in page likes for the last quarter. So again, something we're following, kind of keeping an eye on when you're looking at if you are implementing page like campaigns. If that's something you're trying to do, then I would just keep your eye on that. And then also we are really watching marketplace ads. since Meta reintroduced Facebook Jobs in Q4, we've seen a 13% increase in reach on ads in Marketplace. So they haven't scaled the solution yet for Facebook Jobs, okay, but obviously we're on that. We're keeping an eye on that. But a lot of carriers are focusing on doing targeted ads in Marketplace that kind of mimic job placement ads. So, something to think about, something to talk to your strategist about, and just really look at as you're looking at social media strategy. And then we're going to wrap up this section with really understanding what's the broader impact on social when it comes to leads and hires. So we know that social media drives awareness and engagement. But one of the things that our team did is they went back and kind of looked at all the conversion activity from January through October of last year. And they were able to see that what ended up happening is that when, even though a lead might not arrive directly from social, it was in that driver journey. And so users might not convert on that initial touch point. If, like, let's say they click on a social ad, they didn't initially convert, but social advertising often becomes the catalyst that will bring them back. Okay. So I thought this was super interesting. You can see kind of what was delivered here with leads and calls and additional apply now clicks. And so we're basically, the takeaway here is don't sleep on your social media strategy. Make sure that it's there and it's in the mix, because we know that it's actually providing support even after that first initial click, even if it doesn't convert immediately. So something to keep your eye on. All right, Scott, I am going to turn it over to you for our driver retention section.
Excellent. Thanks, Priscilla. Thank you guys for giving us your time today. Just kind of real quickly from a Q4 standpoint, and frankly, really 2025, and even as you're going into 2026, here's the word to remember right now from a retention standpoint, and it's predictability. Predictability is what drivers are looking for, and I know that in this kind of challenging market, that sometimes is a little bit difficult to deliver on, but that's really what we're seeing from drivers. That's what we're hearing from drivers as far as what they're looking for right now. So looking at our data right now, equipment issues remain the leading source of driver frustration, accounting for nearly one-third of all retention conversations and concerns that we had with drivers. Compensation-related issues followed closely, driven primarily by scheduling quality and really consistency of miles rather than just pay rate alone. And we'll get into a little bit of the pay rate discussion here in the next slide. Operational challenges, particularly customer-related issues that you'll see here in a second, and really communication gaps really continue to impact driver satisfaction. And I think we have this in a later slide, but it was really the one main issue that increased in Q4, where really equipment issues and compensation related issues kind of stayed the same from Q3 to Q4. So, I think the big thing is as 2025 closed, really drivers showed increased sensitivity to planning, to communication, and really customer friction, signaling kind of a potential retention risk as we are now into 2026. So this next slide is kind of what we heard from drivers who voluntarily left their job in Q4. And these were really kind of the top issues that their top 10 issues that we heard from drivers, or the drivers were having before they left, and really from our exit interview data. It was primarily driven by predictable earnings challenges rather than just really isolated pay dissatisfaction. What we saw really in Q4 is that pay rate complaints were often the symptom. They really were not the overall source of the driver's dissatisfaction. What we really heard is the drivers left when they couldn't count on staying productive. So when miles dropped or became erratic, the retention risk really increased quickly. So predictable miles really remain the strongest stabilizer in driver retention. Equipment issues, for those of you that have been on these discussions before and have listened to our podcast, you hear me talk about how equipment issues often cascade into compensation problems. And that's really what we have seen really in 2025. We really saw it again in 2024, is it's not just a frustration from my truck is down, it's really preventing them from earning money. And so when breakdowns stack up, what we see is drivers seek stability elsewhere. The other thing I would tell you, if you look at number 5 right there on equipment assignment, These are really talking about your new drivers, the ones you've just invested a lot of time and money to bring in. The worst thing you can do is get them in a truck that is either broke down before they even get in it, or it's not clean, or it has not been inspected. You've got check engine lights, anything that's going to put that driver in what we have seen in the first, couple of weeks. They don't see that really as a breakdown. They see that kind of as a sign of respect, and they think, is this what I'm in for going forward? Is this not just a thing that just happened, unfortunately, that I had a breakdown? They think this is something that's going to be consistent. And we see that, particularly drivers in their first 60 days, we see that those are the drivers when they have an equipment issue early, right out of orientation, those are the drivers that start looking for another job pretty quickly. So again, this one kind of speaks to the predictability, and this is something that we saw. You saw number 10 on there was loading and unloading issues, which were really customer related issues. It was detention related issues. This is the first time that this issue has really popped up in our voluntary quit data. Again, I think this really goes back to the predictability side of things, and how when drivers are detained or when they're having issues at a customer, how that really is impacting driver satisfaction. And so anything again that is going to affect that driver's ability to log consistent miles is going to go back to, again, compensation. So we see a lot of these issues cascading into compensation issues. And again, it's not necessarily pay rate related. It's really that consistency and that ability to earn something consistently on a week to week basis so that driver really knows what to predict. Again, talking about consistency, talking about pay, I said to you earlier that pay rate is more a symptom. It's not one of the main things. As you can see, three of the top 10 root causes from our voluntary quit data were really around miles. We saw scheduling quality continued to be the single biggest driver of compensation dissatisfaction. Inconsistent miles, load availability reinforced the theme that drivers equate with pay consistency, not cent per mile alone. That's one thing that I would tell you. The other thing I would tell you that's not really on here is when you look at pay accuracy and clarity. That is a real big thing that we're hearing from drivers. Any kind of issue with their paycheck or confusion about how you're paying something, whether it's training pay, whether it's breakdown pay, anything like that, anything that is causing confusion or clarity within a driver's pay rate, we've really seen an uptick in drivers starting to look elsewhere when that pay not just is not predictable, but is also unclear. So that's kind of the one thing that I would tell you. Again, really the big thing overall here in Q4 is that compensation issues really continue to be driven by consistency rather than pay rate alone. And I would definitely pay attention to that as we are now in 2026. And as Priscilla mentioned earlier, we see drivers exiting the market. We see capacity tightening. Now we're just waiting for a bump in freight. So communication, this is really kind of the last thing. This is I really want to focus on this just from the simple fact that communication is going to, it's not going to solve a lot of these problems per se, but what I will tell you is that it will make it easier for the driver to stomach some of these things. Anytime we're talking about planning, anytime you're talking about scheduling or why a driver is being planned the way they are, that is one of the most important things you can be doing right now. The other thing is if a driver is connecting with you, if a driver is calling you, respond to that. Even if the driver manager is on the other line talking with another driver, shoot that driver a text, do something from that standpoint to let that driver know that you're aware that they're trying to reach out to you. That is the biggest thing we're hearing. I think one of the things I would tell you right now, we've said this before, drivers don't leave companies, they leave people. That is still absolutely true. But the other thing that we're really starting to see is drivers don't leave companies, they leave silence. So when that driver is not being responded to, when they're not hearing back from you, when they're not being proactively communicated with, that silence is driving a lot of turnover right now. So as you're talking with your operations team, as the driver managers are meeting and discussing what can we do to increase retention, communicate, communicate, communicate. And when you think you've communicated enough, communicate some more. That is again going to help some of the anxiety that drivers are feeling when they're waiting on an assigned load. That communication is going to go a really long ways into keeping that driver in your truck.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Scott. Good stuff. Good stuff. All right, we've got one last section here. We're going to dive in really quickly to wrap this up. This is our driver data. So, any data like related to drivers and their behavior and their opinions. Driver sentiment took a deep dive in Q4. Unfortunately, it declined significantly. All the reviews that we follow, it was down 21% to a 2.38 out of 5 average. So, keep an eye on your reviews, is what I would tell you. Keep a pulse on your drivers and what's going on with them. Also, I thought this was interesting. This came out of our Lead Assist, our AI agents within Lead Assist. And the data coming out of that is showing us that most drivers who engage with the AI agent, they will go through all of the prompts and give them all the information. And then when it's time to connect with the recruiter, they prefer to schedule that for the next day instead of connecting with a recruiter immediately. So kind of even better from the recruiter standpoint, because they have a chance to go in and see what the information that came in before the call, but it schedules the call on the recruiter's calendar. So that's great as well. All right. Next, just wanted to call this out. This was from our fall driver survey that we did. Almost 50% of drivers said that their home time requests are sometimes, rarely, or never respected. So this many, 46% of the drivers fell in those 3 categories. And so again, to Scott's point, like communication is key here when it comes to drivers. And then we always wrap up with sharing with you the top positive and negative words inside driver reviews so you can kind of see what those are. Pretty much the usual suspects here. A lot of these are the same because drivers are talking good and bad about some of these topics like pay and things like that. And then also to give you a breakdown of what the ratings look like. Again, ratings on driver reviews did take a dive in Q4. So that's just a really good indicator to kind of check in with your drivers. 54% were 1 star. So drivers are super polarizing. They're either going to give a super great review or super not great. So just something to kind of keep in mind. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode like we did, give us a virtual high five by leaving a rating and review on your favorite podcast platform. And be sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss out on an episode.
If you have any questions or feedback, you can reach out to us on social media, or you can drop us an email at the email address in the show notes, which are just below. And we'll be back next time for more fun, data, and some insights to help you master your recruiting and retention game. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you soon.